My Sundays were sacred. A cup of dark roast coffee, the soft rustle of newspaper headlines on my laptop, and the rhythmic sounds of Laura jogging with Buddy, our golden retriever, through the quiet neighborhood. It was a simple ritual, predictable in the best way, the calm antidote to a chaotic work week. Laura loved these runs. She said they cleared her head. Lately, she'd needed it more than usual, or so she claimed. I'd noticed the subtle shifts over the past few months. Her abrupt schedule changes, brunches with friends that stretch for hours, the text messages she shielded just out of view with an awkward laugh. But doubts like that felt poisonous. Marriage, I told myself, was built on trust, even when cracks formed around the edges. This morning should have been like any other. Laura's phone charging on the kitchen counter buzzed loudly, cutting through the quiet. The vibration made it skitter slightly on the granite surface. I glanced at the screen out of habit. A group chat notification popped up. The Brunch Coven, a silly name for Laura's closest friends, Stephanie, Camille, and Mariah. Then I saw the message preview. LMAO, Laura's secret lover deserves a medal for putting up with her. Time slowed. The words burned into my brain, refusing to fade. I stared, my pulse quickening. Secret lover? No, that had to be a joke. Stephanie was always making outrageous comments. I wanted to believe that was all it was. But curiosity has teeth, and once it sinks in, it doesn't let go. I told myself I wasn't that guy, the jealous, suspicious husband. I never wanted to be. But something about that message clung to me, dark and insidious. I walked toward the counter, drawn by a force I couldn't explain. Laura's phone had gone dark again, returning to its familiar lock screen. A photo of us smiling on our last anniversary trip to Charleston. She wore a green dress that day, the sunlight catching the gold flecks in her hair. My chest tightened. I shouldn't do this. Trust was the foundation of everything, wasn't it? But doubt gnawed at that foundation now, threatening to bring the whole thing down. With a trembling hand, I tapped in her passcode. She'd given it to me months ago without hesitation. That was permission, right? The group chat opened easily. At first, it was harmless banter, jokes about Camille's terrible cooking, Stephanie's latest dating disaster, Mariah's obsession with crime podcasts. I felt a flicker of guilt for snooping, but then my eyes landed on something that made my stomach turn. Stephanie, still can't believe you pulled that off without Mike noticing, haha. Camille, right? Like a spy movie, except with wine and hotel rooms. Mariah, I'm just saying if he ever finds out, you're dead. But hey, at least it's spicy. My breath hitched. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. They were talking about Laura, my Laura, and they were laughing about something that sounded dangerously close to betrayal. I scrolled back furiously, my thumb moving faster than my mind could process. Then I found it. A photo Camille had sent a few weeks ago. The image was grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but unmistakable. Laura sitting across from a man I didn't recognize. They were in what looked like a dimly lit restaurant, faces illuminated by the flicker of candlelight. Her head was tilted back in laughter, completely at ease. The caption read, Laura and her co-worker. My chest tightened, anger and confusion swirling together in a toxic mix. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, but the playful jabs in the chat told a different story. They knew something I didn't. I set the phone down carefully as though it might explode. My legs felt weak, so I sank into the chair at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the wall. The life I thought I knew, the life I'd built with Laura, was suddenly fragile, teetering on the edge of collapse. Buddy's barking shattered the silence, followed by Laura's cheerful voice from the front yard. Good boy, Buddy! Almost home! Panic gripped me. I wiped my sweaty palms on my jeans, forcing myself to breathe. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed time to think, to figure out what this all meant and what I was supposed to do next. The front door creaked open, and Laura appeared, cheeks flushed from the cold, leash in hand. She smiled brightly when she saw me. Hey, babe, you wouldn't believe what Buddy did. I forced a smile that felt brittle on my face. Good run. Great, she said, unhooking Buddy's leash and ruffling his fur. Coffee ready? Yeah, I croaked, barely able to get the word out. She hummed softly as she poured herself a cup, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I watched her, every movement suddenly foreign and suspect. The image of that blurry photo and the cruel jokes echoed in my mind. Nothing would ever be the same. Laura hummed quietly as she stood by the counter, pouring cream into her coffee. The sound should have been soothing, something familiar and comfortable after years of shared mornings. But today it grated against my nerves. Every gesture, every smile seemed staged, part of a carefully curated performance. I watched her closely, searching for cracks in the facade. Did she know I'd seen the texts? Had I given myself away somehow? "You've been quiet," she said suddenly, turning toward me. "Everything okay?" My stomach nodded. This was it, the perfect opening to demand answers, to confront her with the evidence I'd found. But I froze. I didn't have enough. What if I'd misunderstood? Jumping to conclusions without proof could blow up our entire marriage. "Yeah, just thinking about work stuff," I lied, forcing a casual shrug. She tilted her head, studying me for a moment before accepting my answer with a nod. "You're always thinking about work. You need a hobby," she teased. I tried to smile, but it felt hollow. "Maybe I'll take up jogging." That made her laugh, a soft, melodic sound that once would have filled me with warmth. Now it felt like a cruel echo, reminding me of the messages in the brunch coven, the casual jokes about her so-called secret lover. We sat down at the small kitchen table, steam rising from our mugs. Laura chatted easily about her run, Buddy's antics, and some neighbor who had waved at her from across the street. I nodded along, barely hearing her words. My mind was elsewhere, replaying fragments of the group chat over and over like a broken record. "If he ever finds out, you're dead." "Spy movie with wine in hotel rooms." Her coworker. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to ask outright, the urge to say, "Who was that man in the picture, Laura?" Instead, I said nothing. After breakfast, Laura disappeared upstairs to shower, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The house felt eerily quiet, the ticking of the wall clock amplified in the silence. My chest ached from the weight of suppressed anger and confusion. I stood abruptly, pacing the length of the living room. I needed more information, something concrete. If I confronted Laura now, she'd deny it. She'd twist the narrative, maybe even accuse me of invading her privacy. Without undeniable proof, I'd be the bad guy. I glanced toward the stairs, listening for the sound of water running. She was still in the shower. Her phone lay on the kitchen counter, exactly where she'd left it. My pulse quickened as I crossed the room, every step laced with guilt. I told myself this was necessary. I needed answers, not wild assumptions. Unlocking the phone again, I scrolled back through the group chat. Most of the recent messages were mundane. Plans for their next brunch, memes about married life, complaints about work. But then I found it, a string of messages from last month that made my heart pound. "Stephanie, you guys are wild, LOL. Can't believe you pulled off that weekend without Mike suspecting a thing." Camille, "Honestly, I was stressed for you, Laura. But hey, hotel sex is worth it, right?" Mariah, "Stop. Y'all are gonna get her in trouble. But seriously, he seems nice. Hope he doesn't catch on." My head spun. Hotel sex. The words echoed in my brain, sharp and unrelenting. Laura had told me she was going on a girls' weekend that month. Just the four of them. Some much-needed time away from the daily grind. I hadn't questioned it at the time. Why would I? She kissed me goodbye at the door, luggage in hand, and promised to call when they got to the hotel. Now I wondered if that had been a lie, too. A cold fury settled in my chest. They were mocking me, these women who sat around sipping mimosas and joking about my ignorance. And Laura, my wife, the person I'd trusted with my heart, was at the center of it all. The sound of the shower turning off snapped me back to reality. I locked the phone and set it down, retreating to the living room just as Laura came downstairs, wrapped in a towel, her damp hair clinging to her shoulders. "Hey," she said, smiling as she adjusted the towel around her chest. "You okay? You look kind of pale." I forced a laugh, though it felt like shards of glass in my throat. "Yeah, just zoned out for a minute." She raised an eyebrow but didn't press. "Mind if I use the dryer?" I don't want to drip all over the place. Go ahead, I said, my voice tight. As she disappeared into the laundry room, I clenched my fist trying to steady myself. The weight of what I'd discovered was unbearable. I knew I couldn't keep pretending forever. The cracks were already showing, threatening to widen into a chasm I couldn't cross. But not yet. I needed more. I needed the truth. No half answers, no evasions, and I was willing to do whatever it took to get it. The rest of the day passed in a haze, each moment weighed down by the gnawing realization that my marriage might be a carefully woven lie. Laura moved through the house with effortless ease, oblivious to the storm swirling inside me. She folded laundry in the living room while watching one of those renovation shows she loved, where couples argued over kitchen backsplashes. I sat on the couch beside her, pretending to scroll through emails, though my phone screen was blank. "You okay, babe?" she asked, folding a shirt neatly before placing it on the pile. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about work." She gave me a sympathetic look. "You work too hard. Maybe we should plan a weekend away, just the two of us." My stomach clenched. A weekend away, I thought bitterly, like the one she'd allegedly spent with her friends. The idea of playing along with this charade made my skin crawl, but I nodded anyway. "That sounds nice." Her smile widened, warm and genuine. For a moment I wanted to believe that none of this was real, that I'd misunderstood everything, that those texts were just harmless jokes between friends. But the memory of that photo and the words "hotel sex is worth it" kept flashing through my mind like a neon sign. I couldn't shake it. That night, as Laura slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The steady rhythm of her breathing was a stark contrast to the chaos in my head. I'd always been a logical person, someone who approached problems methodically and rationally. But this wasn't a problem I could solve with spreadsheets or strategic planning. I needed proof. Quietly, I slipped out of bed and padded downstairs to my office. The glow of the computer monitor illuminated the dark room as I sat down and opened a browser window. My hands hovered over the keyboard, hesitant. What was I even looking for? Hotel bookings, credit card statements, anything that might confirm my suspicions. I logged into our joint bank account, my heart racing as transaction histories loaded on the screen. Most of it was routine: groceries, gas, a few online shopping orders from Laura. But then I saw it, a charge from a boutique hotel downtown on the same weekend she'd claimed to be out of town with her friends. I clicked on the transaction, hoping for more details, but it was just a simple line item. No names, no reservation specifics. My pulse quickened. Why would she lie about being out of town if she was just staying downtown? Desperation gnawed at me. I needed more information, and there was only one place left to turn, the one place I swore I'd never go. I opened Laura's social media accounts, the passwords saved from years of trust. Guilt twisted in my stomach as I navigated through her posts and messages. Most of it was harmless: pictures of brunch plates, comments on friends' photos, funny memes shared with Camille and the others. But then I found a private message thread with a name I didn't recognize: Ethan Harper. My blood ran cold. The conversation was sparse but telling. "Ethan, had a great time last weekend. Hope we can do it again soon." Laura, "Me too. It was perfect." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might wake Laura upstairs. The casual intimacy of the exchange was unmistakable. This wasn't a coworker or a distant friend. This was someone she'd spent time with, someone she clearly wasn't telling me about. I leaned back in my chair, numb. The evidence was piling up, each piece heavier than the last. The texts from her friends, the hotel charge, the private messages with Ethan. Still, part of me clung desperately to denial. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe Ethan was just a friend, and I was seeing connections where there were none. But deep down, I knew better. The man in the photo Camille had taken, the one with Laura at the dimly lit restaurant, looked suspiciously like Ethan's profile picture. I closed the browser window and rubbed my face with trembling hands. I needed to confront her, but not tonight. I wasn't ready yet. Instead, I sat there in the dark, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. The life Laura and I had built together, the years of love, trust, and shared memories, felt like a house of cards, teetering on the edge of collapse. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending everything was normal, but one thing was certain: I wouldn't rest until I knew the full truth. The next morning I woke up before Laura. Her arm lay draped across my chest, warm and heavy, a reminder of the bond we had built over years of shared mornings. But today it felt suffocating. I stared at the ceiling, the weight of last night's discovery pressing down on me like an anvil. The messages between Laura and Ethan had replayed endlessly in my mind throughout the restless night. Hope we can do it again soon. It was perfect. Those two sentences told me everything I needed to know, even if I wasn't ready to fully admit it. Beside me, Laura stirred, her lashes fluttering as she slowly woke. "Morning," she murmured, voice husky with sleep. "Morning," I managed, keeping my voice steady. She stretched, yawning lazily before propping herself up on one elbow. "I'm thinking pancakes for breakfast. Sound good?" "Sure." I forced a smile, though my stomach was knotted with bitterness. "Great," she said cheerfully, climbing out of bed and padding toward the bathroom. The sound of the door clicking shut and the water running filled the room. I exhaled sharply, clenching my fists. I had to figure out my next move. Confronting Laura now was tempting. God knows I wanted answers. But I knew she'd deny everything unless I had undeniable proof. And even if she didn't, how would I handle the fallout? Instead, I resolved to stay calm and gather more information. Breakfast was awkward. Laura chatted casually about her plans for the day, while I nodded along, pretending to listen. Every word felt hollow, every laugh forced. "So," she said, pouring syrup over her pancakes, "I'm meeting Camille for coffee later. Just a quick catch-up." My grip on my fork tightened. Camille, the same friend who had joked in the group chat about hotel sex, the same one who knew everything and probably found it hilarious that I was clueless. "Sounds fun," I said evenly. She smiled. "You don't mind, right?" "Of course not. Go have fun." Laura kissed me on the cheek before grabbing her coat and keys. "Love you." "Love you too." The lie stung as it left my lips, but she didn't seem to notice. The door clicked shut behind her, and the house fell into a suffocating silence. I stood there for a moment, staring at the empty space where she had been. Then, with a burst of determination, I grabbed my keys and headed downtown. The charge from Laura's bank statement was burned into my memory. The Crescent Hotel, a sleek boutique place right in the heart of the city. I'd passed by it before, never thinking much of it. Now it loomed in front of me like a monument to betrayal. I pushed through the glass doors and approached the front desk, where a polished young woman greeted me with a rehearsed smile. "Welcome to the Crescent. How can I help you today?" I forced a polite smile. "Hi, I was hoping to get a receipt for a recent stay. It was booked under my wife's name, Laura Cooper. She stayed here last month." Her smile wavered. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't release guest information without proper authorization." I expected that. "Of course, totally understand," I said, chuckling lightly. "It's just, my wife asked me to get a copy for tax purposes, and I'm trying to save her the trip. You know how it is." The receptionist's expression softened. "Oh, I get it. Happy wife, happy life, right?" "Exactly." She tapped a few keys on her computer. "What were the dates of the stay?" I rattled off the weekend in question, my heart racing as she searched the system. "Ah, here it is," she said brightly. "2 nights in a deluxe suite." Deluxe suite. My stomach churned. Laura had never mentioned booking a suite for a girl's weekend. "Could I get a printed receipt?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Of course." She clicked a few buttons and handed me a crisp sheet of paper. "Here you go." "Thanks," I muttered, my voice tight. I scanned the receipt as I walked toward the exit, my eyes zeroing in on the damning details. Guest, Laura Cooper. Guests in room, 2 check-in, Friday, 3 p.m. Check-out, Sunday, 11 a.m. 2 guests. The air felt thick and heavy as I stood outside the hotel, the realization sinking in like a stone in my gut. Laura hadn't been alone. She hadn't spent that weekend with Camille, Mariah, or Stephanie. She had been here, with someone else. Ethan. The name seared itself into my brain, bitter and sharp. I clenched the receipt tightly, the edges cutting into my palm. By the time I got home, Laura was back, sitting on the couch with her phone in hand. She looked up and smiled as I walked in. "Hey, how was your morning?" Fine, I said curtly, slipping the crumpled receipt into my jacket pocket. She frowned slightly. Everything okay? Just tired, I muttered. She seemed to accept that, returning her attention to her phone. I stood there for a long moment, watching her, my mind swirling with anger and disbelief. The cracks in our marriage were widening, and I could no longer pretend everything was fine. I knew the confrontation was inevitable. The only question was when, and whether I'd be ready for the fallout when it came. I spent the rest of the afternoon pacing the house, the crumpled hotel receipt burning a hole in my jacket pocket. The paper had become more than just evidence. It was a weight dragging me deeper into this nightmare I hadn't asked for. Every glance toward Laura filled me with simmering anger. She hummed softly in the kitchen while preparing dinner, oblivious to the emotional hurricane tearing through me. I couldn't decide whether her calm demeanor was genuine or an elaborate performance. Did she think I was stupid, blind, or had lying to me simply become second nature? Dinner's almost ready, she called cheerfully over her shoulder. Spaghetti and garlic bread, your favorite. I forced a tight smile. Sounds great. My voice felt distant, robotic, as though someone else were speaking for me. Laura didn't seem to notice, or if she did, she brushed it off as normal post-work fatigue. The smell of garlic wafted through the room, mingling with the bitter taste of betrayal already sitting heavy on my tongue. I couldn't eat. Instead, I pushed spaghetti around my plate, nodding absently as Laura rattled on about Camille's new job and Mariah's recent breakup. Her words blurred into meaningless noise, my focus fixed on the growing chasm between us. You're quiet tonight, she said, tilting her head curiously. Everything okay? Yeah, I lied. Just a long day. Her brow furrowed slightly, but she didn't press further. I wondered if guilt was gnawing at her too, or if she had convinced herself that her secrets would never come to light. Later that night, after Laura had fallen asleep, I sat alone in the living room, the glow from my phone illuminating my face. The hotel receipt sat on the coffee table in front of me, its presence an unspoken challenge. I had more questions than answers, and one name that kept circling my thoughts like a vulture: Ethan Harper. Who was he really? I opened Laura's social media again, my fingers moving with a mix of dread and determination. Ethan's profile was sparse, but there were just enough breadcrumbs to paint a picture. His bio listed him as a marketing consultant for a firm downtown. Handsome in a polished magazine cover way, sharp jawline, perfectly styled hair, expensive suits. A man who clearly knew how to command attention. A bitter laugh escaped me. Is this who she traded me for? Scrolling further, I found a series of photos from company events. In one, Ethan stood next to a familiar face, Laura. They weren't touching, but there was something unmistakable in their body language, a closeness that spoke volumes. I clenched my jaw, the weight of suspicion crystallizing into bitter certainty. That photo had been posted just a week before the hotel weekend. My pulse raced. I couldn't let this drag on any longer. The deceit was rotting everything from the inside out, and I was done pretending. The next morning, I woke early, a strange calm settling over me. Laura was still asleep, her chest rising and falling steadily under the covers. I watched her for a moment, wondering how we had ended up here. I thought about all the years we'd spent building a life together, the vacations, lazy Sunday mornings, the little inside jokes only we understood. Had any of it been real? Or had Laura always been capable of this kind of betrayal, and I'd just been too blind to see it? The confrontation couldn't wait any longer. By the time Laura came downstairs, dressed casually in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, I was already seated at the kitchen table, the crumpled hotel receipt smoothed out in front of me like a damning piece of evidence in a courtroom. Morning, she said brightly, pouring herself a cup of coffee. You're up early. Yeah, I said evenly, my voice devoid of warmth. We need to talk. She paused, the mug halfway to her lips. Okay, what's going on? I slid the receipt across the table toward her. Found this yesterday. Her face paled as she read it, the blood draining from her cheeks. For a moment she said nothing, her expression a mix of shock and guilt. I can explain, she finally said, her voice shaky. Go ahead, I said coldly, leaning back in my chair. I'm all ears. Laura set the receipt down carefully as though it were a bomb that might go off if she handled it wrong. It's not what you think. Don't, I cut in sharply. Don't insult my intelligence. 2 nights in a suite, 2 guests. Who was it? Her lips trembled. Michael, please. Who was it, Laura? I demanded, my voice rising. Was it Ethan? The color drained completely from her face, confirming what I already knew. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Even though I'd suspected it, hearing it, or rather seeing her reaction, made it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. Don't, just don't. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I stood up slowly, the chair scraping against the floor. I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my keys. Michael, wait, please. But I was already out the door, the cool morning air hitting me like a slap to the face. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing. The life I thought I knew was gone, shattered by lies and betrayal. And now I had to figure out what came next. I drove without a destination, the hum of the engine a dull backdrop to the chaos in my mind. Laura's pale, guilt-stricken face was seared into my memory, a haunting reminder that my life as I knew it was crumbling. I couldn't go back to pretending, not after that. The betrayal had settled into my chest like a jagged shard, sharp and unyielding. Every moment I'd spent doubting myself, questioning whether I was paranoid or overreacting, it had all led to this undeniable truth. She had been with Ethan. The weight of it was unbearable. After driving aimlessly for what felt like hours, I pulled into the parking lot of a quiet park on the outskirts of town. The air was crisp, the sky painted in muted shades of gray. I sat on a weathered bench, my hands clenched tightly together as I stared at the empty path ahead. A group of joggers passed by, their laughter echoing through the chilly morning air. I envied their simplicity, their unburdened lives. How did we get here? I replayed the last few years in my mind, searching for signs I might have missed. The late nights at work, the sudden bursts of secrecy, the guarded phone conversations. Hindsight made it all so obvious, but I'd wanted so badly to trust her. My phone buzzed in my pocket, dragging me back to reality. Laura's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring. A second call followed, then a text. Please come home. We need to talk. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it and disappear, but another part, the part still tethered to the life we had built, needed closure. With a deep breath, I stood and headed back to the car. When I walked through the front door, Laura was waiting in the living room, her face pale and drawn. She looked as though she hadn't moved since I left. Michael, she began, her voice shaky. I'm so sorry. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, crossing my arms. You don't get to start with sorry. She flinched, but I didn't care. I need the truth, I said firmly. All of it. No more lies, no more half explanations. Who is Ethan to you? Her lower lip trembled. He's someone I met through work. We started talking more after that marketing campaign last year. I nodded, my jaw clenched. And? She took a shaky breath. It just happened. We met up a few times outside of work. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I laughed bitterly. Didn't mean for it to get this far? You booked a hotel suite with him, Laura. That wasn't an accident. Tears welled in her eyes. I know. I know I messed up, Michael. I was stupid, selfish. I never wanted to hurt you. Well, congratulations, I snapped. You did. Silence hung heavy between us, thick with the weight of everything unsaid. I want to fix this, she said quietly. If you'll let me, I'll do whatever it takes. Counseling, quitting my job, whatever you need. I stared at her, the woman I had once loved so completely. I wanted to believe her, to cling to the hope that we could salvage something from this wreckage. But the damage was too deep. You think quitting your job will undo this? I asked bitterly. It won't, Laura. I'll never forget what you did. She sobbed quietly, burying her face in her hands. But I didn't move to comfort her. For years, I had been the one to smooth things over, to compromise, to forgive. But this was beyond forgiveness. I'm done, I said softly but firmly. Her head shot up, eyes wide and pleading. No, please. Michael, don't say that. I can't live like this, I continued. Every time I look at you, I'll see him. I'll see the lies, the betrayal. And I deserve better than that. She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. I'll be staying with my brother for a while, I said. We'll figure out the logistics later. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked upstairs to pack a bag. My hands trembled as I stuffed clothes into a duffel, the finality of my decision sinking in with each item I folded. When I came back down, Laura was still standing in the living room, tears streaming down her face. I love you, she choked out. I paused at the door, my heart aching despite everything. Maybe you did once, I said quietly, but not enough to stay faithful. With that, I walked out, the door clicking shut behind me like the final punctuation on a chapter I never wanted to write. The drive to my brother's place was surreal, a strange mix of grief and relief swirling in my chest. I had lost the life I thought I knew, but I had also reclaimed my dignity, my sense of self. As painful as it was, I knew I had made the right decision. Because sometimes love isn't enough, and sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do.